Subscribe to the channel. Thanks. r/AskReddit. What is the weirdest reason you were called into your boss's office? Back when I was an intern, a coworker told me to give a pile of papers to my boss and to tell him that he is an asshole. He told me explicitly that I have to call him that way. I went to my boss's office, told him who sent him the papers, and then I told him, well, he also said that I should say something to you, which is really unplea. Is it that I'm an asshole? Me, well yes, but him, it's okay, he's one too. It turned out that those two guys are basically BFFs, and that they constantly do something like this to pull me away from a customer who was yelling at me, who my manager knew was fucking crazy. He even pulled the whole SBWF in my office. Now, down the hallway gag. The customer just gave me the smug haha look as I walked away. I was shaken up by it, but as soon as I walked in and closed the door, he apologized and told me that the customer who was just yelling at me had been banned from our business for causing shit with employees and other customers. And as soon as my manager saw them walk in, he called the cops and the cops were on their way. He then pulls up the cameras on his computer and says, "I'll be right back. Watch this," and he leaves his office. I watch the cameras and see him walk right up to the cops who just entered, take the cops to the customer, and has the cops escort the customer out of the building. He then turns to the camera and gives a big thumbs up to promote me to a supervisor job I didn't even apply for or was aware of. 1. To pull me away from a customer who was yelling at me, who my manager knew was fucking crazy. He even pulled the whole SBWF in my office. Now, down the hallway gag. The customer just gave me the smug haha look as I walked away. I was shaken up by it, but as soon as I walked in and closed the door, he apologized and told me that the customer who was just yelling at me had been banned from our business for causing shit with employees and other customers. And as soon as my manager saw them walk in, he called the cops and the cops were on their way. He then pulls up the cameras on his computer and says, "I'll be right back. Watch this," and he leaves his office. I watch the cameras and see him walk right up to the cops who just entered, take the cops to the customer, and has the cops escort the customer out of the building. He then turns to the camera and gives a big thumbs up to promote me to a supervisor job I didn't even apply for or was aware of. She wanted me to watch the Detective Pikachu trailer with her. Used to make levels for Quake while taking tech support calls. One day, while modeling a level and doing an FFR disk format reinstall, I notice a boss out of the corner of my eye. Fuck it. I'm busted. I don't even try to hide what I'm doing. Mute the customer and ask if he needs anything. Put yourself in time when you get off this call. I'd like to see you in the pit. The pit was a corner of the call center where all the lead techs and bosses sat. My stomach lurches. Okay. I turn my attention back to the caller and finish up in about another 20 minutes. I love this job. I'm really bummed. I switch my status and start walking back to the pit, except now there's 3 bosses right outside my cubicle. Can you do a level that's the floor plan of the call center with the elevator and all? No shit. I was promoted a month later. I used to grab a chicken sandwich on my first break at work. Apparently, some new hire assumed I was going to lunch 2 hours into my shift. After I came back 15 minutes later, our standard break time, I got called in to ask why I felt I should be going to lunch. Told them I didn't, and to check my time card. I was in college, and whenever we had to go on rounds of the apartments we had to submit a report of what had happened on our rounds. Most of the time nothing happened, and there was nothing to write about. However, I got tired of writing a paragraph or 2 of started rounds. Saw no one finished rounds, so I started making my reports have themes. I wrote them up like my rounds were important plot points in cowboy, Star Wars, or horror movies, and usually included background music to listen to while reading them. At the end of the semester, I ended by submitting a report written in rhyme to the night before Christmas, and he called me in to tell me that he was going to fire me for going probation or any other disciplinary action first until the dean of students saw the poem and loved it. She wanted me to decorate her office for the Halloween decorating contest, since I wasn't worthy of having an office. I said fuck that and decorated the closet by my cube and won. Yay, I won a Starbucks gift card with $1.90 on it. Appears our lady bought a $5 gift card, used that to buy a drink, then send it to me. I made a girl uncomfortable because I told her one of my friends was killed in a shooting a few days before. It was relevant to the convo. They said they would fire me if I ever made an employee feel uncomfortable again. By the way, top 100 places to work my asshole. I used to work in a school. My boss was the principal. I'm gay. This is actually sort of relevant to the story. One of the rules in the school is that principal and VP doors are to stay open at all times, unless they are having a meeting with parents. All the VP and PS doors were closed. This is super odd. There were 4 VPs and a principal, so having them all closed is basically unheard of. Even the administrative staff were freaking out a bit. Finally, I get buzzed into the principal's office. Of course everyone is looking at me like, what did you do? I walk into the office and my boss, an older lady that I totally respect, finishes up her email, pushes her glasses on her face, and says, what do you know about Lady Gaga? As it turned out, they were all trying to one-up each other in the talent show and my boss wanted a gay opinion. I told her she needed to do Bad Romance, and kept it from everyone. She had managed to get a large piece of glass lodged into her hand from a picture frame she attempted to catch when she knocked it over. I was working in a college with a nursing department, so I went and got some professors. Another employee who didn't speak the same language as anyone else who happened to be in the office that day had decided to take a nap on his desk. Boss wanted to ask my opinion on what he should do about it because he was flummoxed. Worked at a fast food restaurant. Once, there was a mistake in my paycheck. I called the next morning and complained about it to the shift supervisor, but she abruptly cut me off and said that she was super busy and she couldn't deal with it right now, which pissed me off because I deliberately called before the store opened so that it wouldn't be busy. The next day, I went into work and was called into the store manager's office. Before the store manager started talking, I complained about the mistake in my paycheck and about how shift supervisor was a bitch because she cut me off and claimed she was busy when I knew she wasn't because the store wasn't open yet. Store manager tells me to stfu. The reason he called me in is because the store was robbed at gunpoint the day before. Some dude got into the store before it opened and shift supervisor was there alone. TFW, I had called to bitch at shift supervisor while she was being held at gunpoint. Because a girl I'd been on 3 dates with asked me to go to court with her to testify that she'd had custody of her daughter consistently. She hadn't. She'd dropped the kid off at grandma's while she worked on being a party planner. I said no, and she contacted my department to accuse me of sexual harassment. Thankfully, for me, she'd previously worked for the company. They knew she was a fucking loon, so they just called me in to get my side of the story before warning me away from her. If I hadn't already made the determination to separate, they were the deciding vote. The new policy of not transporting wildlife in the work van had to be explained to me because I was the reason the policy came into existence and B, I was the only person on the site it would ever apply to. It was a sparrow that had flown into a window. I carried it back to the mailroom, found a box, and took it to a wildlife rehabber that night. The employee driving the van was very concerned about this tiny half-ounce bird getting loose in the van and attacking her. Had my boss call me in once because a parent accused me of hitting their child. Apparently the kid came home with a bruise. When they asked me what happened, I explained the kid wasn't even in my room. They were in a class on the other side of the building, and I didn't even see them the entire day. Turns out the kid had a hockey game that night before he came home. Guess where the bruise came from? Thankfully, once they had the facts, they pretty much told the parent this never happened. You are mistaken, and we are standing by our teacher. It was scary though, cause you seldom get out of these types of accusations without at least a suspension as they look into it. I used to work in a cinema, and one day we had a drawing competition for children, based on some film or another. I was bored on shift, so drew a really crappy picture, scribbled a load, and made it look like a child had drawn it, and put by Lasagna Princess aged 7 1/2. A couple of days later I get called to the GM's office and the picture is on the desk. So I'm like, ah crap, I'm about to get told off for doing this during work hours. GM asked me if I drew it. I got on with him fairly well, so I laughed and opened up to it. Turns out the drawing competition was run by a film company and the winner would win a prize, and the cinema that entered the winner would also win a prize. My drawing won, and we got a massive TV and games console for our staff room. The prize that should have gone to the winner was given to a child who entered the competition from our cinema. I think it was a family weekend away, and a goodie bag. Said good morning after grabbing a water bottle near his office door and got a delayed, mumbled response. A few minutes later I get a come see me, please email. I walk in, and he asks if he had been snoring, and asks for water. I grab him a bottle, and he takes a pill, then hands me his keys, which have market card on them, and asks me to get him a Coke. He is diabetic and a kidney transplant recipient. He had passed out and needed sugar ASAP. Got called into my old boss's office to ask if I noticed how bad one of my coworkers smelled too. Turns out customers were complaining, and he asked me if it was true. It was. Later, the same coworker disappeared, and cops showed up saying he might have been involved in kidnapping a girl. He had a couple tabs open, and asked me which clutch would go better in his Mini. The weird part was that I was new there. I drove an automatic at the time, and there was a fantastic mechanic who knows basically everything about cars on staff. During allergy season I had a cough, and was clearing my throat a lot. There was complaints I was too loud, and having allergies on purpose. Both my husband and I have stories. Husband was called into the boss office to help the coworker set up stacks of cardboard boxes with accessories to resemble the boss and his wife having a tea party. Coworker wanted to startle the boss upon his return from a business trip. I was called into the office by the store manager and assistant store manager. They wanted to ask me, as the game manager, if the new transfer from out of state was gay. I had only met her 5 minutes before. After I stopped laughing, I said yeah, and she's going to transfer in 6 months to another store, in Florida probably, because of a girl. It was 5.5 months, but I was right. In the early 2000s my boss called me in, so he could show me Wikipedia, which he had just discovered. He says ask me anything, and I'll find the answer. I asked how many tacos are sold per day in San Antonio. He was angry, because that's obviously not a question that Wikipedia can answer. I was told that the fact that I needed to pump breast milk while at work made some of my co-workers uncomfortable. We went back and forth for about 9 months. Finally I gave up and decided on a different career path and called hours. The next day there was a small room with a lock, no more pumping in the public toilet for me, and everyone knew the proper lingo of if you need a few minutes to pump just let us know. Then I went back to college in my late 20s and that was the second best decision I've ever made, the kid being the first. I just love how it made some people uncomfortable that I was lactating. I never offered to show them anything or bring attention to. Subscribe. Thanks for watching UpGoat Reddit. Try like and subscribe button if it still works.